The general election has finally begun, and the Trump campaign has cut its first real ad against Joe Biden. I took immediate notice. I thought it's a fantastic ad, and it's one of those ones that cuts across several different themes that we've talked about here on the show, and which will very much land with the general electorate. Let's take a listen to that ad.
This is a crisis.
This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysterical xenophobia.
Biden's son inked a $1 billion deal with a subsidiary of the Bank of China.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They're not bad folks.
Since the outbreak, the Communist Party has been mobilizing overseas organizations to buy local supplies and send them to China.
It is in our self-interest that China continue to prosper. What a beautiful history we wrote together. Banning all travel will not stop it.
The president is right. That travel restriction on China, as every public health official we've talked to said, bought the country time.
That was a very smart move right there.
Hysterical xenophobia. Xenophobia. I complimented him on dealing with China. I'm not going nuts.
Wow. It's one of those ads that speaks across, like the political correctness stuff that I think both anti-establishment left and right hate, Hunter Biden corruption allegations, mental faculties. I mean, that's one of those ads that in a single minute, it tells a very big story. Decades of politics, corruption allegations, the way he looks at China, and then, of course, his age. I mean, it's one of those things that I think speaks exactly to the heart of it. And I think it's going to be devastating. I mean, that's really the first time I saw that, and I thought, wow, that is, we always knew kind of what it would look like, but I was like,
right.
That is
it's well
brutal.
Look, it also just reminds you of what an actual negative ad looks like.
Yeah, I thought that too.
It makes you realize just how soft the Democratic primary was. Right. And still the media was like, oh, you guys are so mean and on Twitter, and you're so toxic and terrible. And it was the softest primary, that I can possibly recall. None of this was raised. None of this was even alluded
not
to.
Once. Yeah.
Which, again, you realize that was not doing a service to the Democratic electorate, to the people of which there are many who really are fundamentally committed to Donald Trump. You did not do them any favors by leaving all of this off the table.
We talked about this on the show for months, about Hunter, about his family, about China, about all of this. All of it was known. And the Sanders campaign and the rest of them, they all sat on it. They did nothing. And as I covered here, this was the weakest Democratic primary in modern history. I played that ad of Barack Obama talking about Hillary Clinton. She'll say anything and do nothing. She voted for NAFTA. She voted for Iraq. You can't trust her. That was it. 2008, the last real contested Democratic primary where there was hardball tactics. And then that morphs from Bernie in 2016, like, I don't care about your damn emails.
Right.
Turns out the country cared about your damn emails.
Right.
Then in this time around, I don't care about Hunter Biden. Joe is a good man. Joe is not corrupt.
And beyond
everybody knows.
You remember Zephyr Teachout wrote that op-ed about, corruption and Biden and this history of his family members, Hunter most prominently, cashing in with board positions and plum gigs and influence peddling and all those sorts of things. And David Sirota, who we had on this show, who's a senior advisor to Sanders and has known him and worked with him for a long time, blasted that out to their email list. And not only did Bernie distance himself from that, he actually punished Sirota for doing that. That's how sensitive they were to any sort of allegations of anything that came close to being a personal direct hit on Joe Biden rather than sort of vague generalities they were incredibly sensitive with. They really had to push him to even go after him on Social Security and the Iraq War and those sorts of high-level policy issues. At the same time, they also didn't look, what did this election ultimately come down to? Electability, right? And Bernie Sanders, when he won those first states, we saw in the polls, we tracked in the polls, suddenly he became the leader in terms of electability. And then he was winning every state. In the polls, he was leading every state in Super Tuesday. Nate Silver had him projected to win every state for the rest of the primary because he was winning on electability. But they never explicitly made the case that, look, we've got these young, energized supporters. They are with us because of the values that we support, and they may not show up for Joe because he's essentially Hillary Clinton 2.0. They never really made that case and never made it explicitly, and it should have been made from the beginning. And we can now see that Joe does, in fact, have a major electability problem with young people. We've got some new polling that we can put up. This is stunning. Joe Biden today is tied with Donald Trump among voters under 35. Now, to give you some context, Barack Obama in 2008, he won 2/3 of young voters of this demographic. Hillary Clinton won handily. She won 55% of young voters. And today, for Joe Biden, tied. And it's not just that they're tied. It's also a question of, are they going to turn out? I mean, this is a group, notoriously, maybe they show up. Maybe they don't.
Bernie was at the height of his power. They weren't showing up to vote. So,
right.
Yeah, good
luck.
So
how do you think that Joe Biden is going to do with them?
And I mean, I'm looking at all of this, and it's really remarkable. And this, again, shows you Biden's long record is the greatest thing for the Trump campaign. I mean, they can go around. I mean, Joe went out there and said how NAFTA was going to save a specific factory in Delaware that went out of business, shipped jobs to Mexico in 2007.
Yeah.
They can do to Joe Biden what the Obama campaign did to Mitt Romney in 2012. And
they've got the money to do it, and Joe doesn't. Everything is sort of frozen in place right now. He's trying to do these online fundraisers. No idea how successful that is for him. We all know he doesn't have a grassroots fundraising base that he can tap into. I don't think many of those Bernie Sanders donors who chipped in their 10 and 20 bucks are going to pony up for Joe. So it's a very tough situation he's in. At the same time, we have to today, Joe is leading in the polls. So none of this is certain at all. I think, it looks like it's going to be an incredibly close election, which is why this terrible situation with young voters that Joe is in right now could be so ultimately determinative. So I don't want people to think this is like a done deal and Trump's definitely going to win. But there are a lot of vulnerabilities that Joe has that haven't been framed, that haven't been put on the table. There's a massive enthusiasm gap. We know that last time around, at least, Trump outperformed his polls. So that's something that we have to consider as well. And last time around, at this point in the ballgame, Hillary was leading him by 11 points.
Yeah,
so the fact that Joe has a narrow lead here, that should be troubling. That's a red flag.
This is another thing, which is the media never wants to give credit, but if you actually dig down into the Trump numbers and what we hear from the Trump campaign when they come here, is that 1/4 of the people who go to their rallies have never voted before, ever, and are new to the Trump movement. 1/4. That's a lot of people that they're bringing in. So, again, when you underperform, when you're
really
anti-establishment,
statistics, but
okay, I mean, release it publicly. I don't know why they would lie about something like that. But so, like,
you don't?
if you release, fine. I call on them to release it. So there you go. But let's say that's the case. If they're bringing new people into the process, the way that Bernie almost certainly would have if he were on the campaign, it's very difficult to predict. So when you're already losing in the conventional metrics, then you can win on those types of metrics whenever you're in the general election, and that is what leaves Biden vulnerable. Now, and as you said, you can't say that Biden is going to lose this election. That would be ludicrous. There are so many different things that they can hinge on. The economy is literally, where it was the last time around in the Great Depression.
Right.
If they bail out, if they don't get their act together on the bailout, they're going to lose. But there is an opening in order to make it so that they could win big against Joe Biden. And I think that, like I laid out a couple of days ago on my radar, there's the structural issue and then there's the coronavirus crisis itself. If he masters both, then I think he'll win big.
Yeah, and as we've been saying, the problem for Biden and his campaign is it's really not in their hands. They just have to hope that Trump screws things up. They have to hope that Trump doesn't damage him so badly that, that it's not recoverable. But they don't have the money or the wherewithal or the national attention right now to be able to create their own destiny. So that, as a competitor, leaves you in a very vulnerable position when you're just hoping that your opponent makes mistakes.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
All right, we're going to have more Rising for you after this.